Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Udis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's show is pre-recorded and is about critical thinking, or how you know something. Thanks as always to DCTV, Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, Aliyah Jamari, audio and teleprompter, and Dolores Harris, floor director. On this series, we've been challenging some fundamental beliefs. DCTV has brought you this series for 3 years every week since May 2015. We're sometimes the only ones that are telling you that something is true. Some of the things that we tell you are quite controversial, such as that Auschwitz was a uranium enrichment factory. Instead of backing down, we're sticking to our guns, and we're telling you there's nothing wrong with what we're telling you. What is wrong is that you need some help with deciding whether something's true. This is where critical thinking comes in. We have a motive for wanting to help you with critical thinking. We think if you can determine that what we're telling you is correct, you will help all of us stay out of World War III. Speaking about staying out of World War III, I would like to play this 5-year-old interview.
There's just so much information that we're going to ask you, but one of them that I really wanted to know is, you speak a lot about the gold. Where's the gold and all that? It's just why is Goldman Sachs always shorting gold? I mean, they're always these naked shorts. If you know what I'm talking about, they're selling the gold so they can depress the gold. How come they just don't let it rise where the marketplace is?
The reason that they're doing this, manipulating the price of gold, is because the U.S. dollar is losing its status of international reserve currency. And by manipulating the price of gold, they're trying to prevent this. But obviously, that's not working. You've got the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that are no longer paying for the trade among these countries with dollars. Instead, they're using offsets, and they're paying the difference in gold. But let's get back to this issue about the military, because that is critical.
But what does the military have to do with the World Bank? And are you putting everything in context? Is that it, or what? I mean,
okay. What I'm trying to explain is the power that's underpinning the Jesuits and their secret societies. I got a letter from a retired, I guess he was a Marine. His name is Robert O'Bannon. And what he wrote was that this scheme that they have, this network of control, depends on two things. It depends on secrecy, and you can hear now I'm getting access to the public. So that secrecy is breaking down. The other thing it depends on is the military might of the United States. And as long as you can have Knights of Malta placed in key positions and allow them to remain unchallenged and to unilaterally surrender the military might of the United States to the interest of the Vatican, then they will get their way. But what you have now is that these Knights of Malta are outed. And that's why we can say with absolute assurance that the United States is not going to allow its dollar to crash. Why would we allow Federal Reserve notes to disarm this country? Why wouldn't we continue our military strength? Why wouldn't we allow our allies to help us, which is Germany? I had an interview on a very important business website, which has 1.5 million readers per month. And at the end of the interview, what the interviewer asked me, he said, is there something you think that our listeners would be especially interested in? And that's when I started talking about the fact that military helicopter of Germany had buzzed the consulate of the United States in Frankfurt. And so then I went into what the motive was. Mm-hmm. It was because Germany was trying to inform the citizens. It was a shot across the bow. Germany is a very important ally, which we are losing. Look what's happening in the Ukraine now. Germany had negotiated.
The U.S. military is not going to surrender unilaterally through a planned destruction of the unconstitutional Federal Reserve Note. There's something wrong with my internet connections to you. I keep getting strange error messages, like these comments on the YouTube archives for DCTV. One of the commenters said, "I can't seem to access the links you provided. Error, connection refused." And another commenter said, "I looked up Karen Hudis's Twitter for the first time today, and a message popped up saying I was blocked by her account. That's weird." I pay special attention to our means of communication. I've been aware for a very long time that I had no certain way of knowing how we're in touch. I just found an email that's 4 years old about help that I was getting in contacting everybody. And this was from John Rice, dated the 2nd of November, 2014. Subject: Karen Hudis, your campaign to work against anti-bank corruption. Dear Karen, it's great to hear from you and glad you got that tweet message. I'm also tweeting out a lot of your recent interviews. I'm up to 374,000 plus Twitter followers, and I should pass 400,000 by Christmas. In just over 3 years, I've sent out over 1.8 million tweets. Roughly 4,500 to 5,000 go out each day from my 5 Twitter profiles. And I feel it's important to get topical social news out there and optimize it online. What better than the alternative news? One of my proudest moments ever was when you mentioned me in one of your interviews a few months back after I had set up the auto retweets for you. That's when your Twitter reach went from roughly 4,900 to probably over 400,000, with your new fans retweeting your amazing tweets. As Emilio Zapata once said, "I would rather die standing than live on my knees." Keep up your amazing work. All the very best, John Rice. And Andrew tweeted, "Let's get out. The war was to take over Japan's banking system and enslave the Japanese people. Time to kick out all central bankers." Yes, this is a snowball that's going to continue to snowball until the central bankers are kicked out in every single place in the world. And 3 years ago, I blogged and I wrote, "Help figure out what we're missing. If a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody around to hear, does it make a sound?" It's very apt that Oxford University Press has used this metaphor to introduce the concept of quantum physics and the nature of reality. We can rephrase the question as follows: how many people are required to acknowledge hidden corruption before the system is acknowledged as being corrupt? What if this corruption attempts to undermine our perceptions by buying up the City of London, the BBC, other media companies, and Oxford University to create a false sense of reality? Doesn't the corruption nonetheless exist? Of course it does, but then we're faced with other questions, such as, if the corruption runs that deep, isn't it better to let sleeping dogs lie? What if it's clear that the dogs aren't sleeping anymore and that everyone is going to be punished this way? We then have a different set of pragmatic questions. which are not about what's real, but rather whether there's any way to clean up the corruption. If it's clear that powerful individuals who knew about this hidden corruption established a concrete mechanism for the cleanup, the only question for us should be, when can we start? Moving from the rhetorical to the concrete. The hidden corruption is not so hidden anymore. When the United States Congress and the United Kingdom and European parliaments disclosed this corruption on 5 separate occasions, a very powerful political science game theory model predicted with 95% likelihood that the corruption would end. And then I'm giving you a link in the teleprompter, which doesn't work. It's because Jason Erb, who's a person who owned that link for his blog, he removed my comment. I've been fighting Jason Erb for a long time. A Dutch company, Wolters Kluwer, is the agent for most of the companies in the world. Jason Erb, Director of Strategic Alliances for Small Business at Wolters Kluwer's CT Corporation, tried to discredit me. If it's so likely that the corruption will end, and the concrete mechanism to end the corruption is in place, and we need to start right away, what's holding us up? What's the concrete mechanism to end the corruption, and who were the powerful individuals who put this means into place? The fractional reserve paper currencies are the corruption that has to end, and the mechanism to end this corruption is the global debt facility and the Bretton Woods institutions, that's the World Bank and the IMF. They were established by Jose Rizal and his lawyer, Ferdinand Marcos. So where do we stand? In Holland, Herman Wijfels has been man enough to own up to the fact that the elite, not only in our country, but in others, have betrayed their duty to the people. The Right Honorable Angela Smith, Louise Ellman MP, and Tracy Crouch MP are all asking George Osborne, this is a few years ago, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK Treasury, about the UK's share of gold in the global debt facility. The US Congress hasn't admitted that it has continued to declare the state of emergency ever since 1861, or that a second secret constitution replaced the original Constitution in 1871. And the Senate Committee on the Judiciary is not prepared to admit that the United States federal courts are not courts of equity, and the House Judiciary Committee is not prepared to certify that more than 2/3 of the state legislatures have requested a constitutional amendment, and this satisfies the requirement under the United States Constitution under Article 5. What we are lacking is a collective sense of decency and the ability to admit what we've done wrong. This is not rocket science or quantum physics. That's all we are missing. Why is this so hard? Help me on this. And then I signed it as the Acting General Counsel of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. That's another word for the World Bank. Let me answer the question on where we stand. There appears to be very heavy interference with my trying to keep you informed via my social media. This is not a bad thing. It should be reassuring for those of you who are worried that we're in danger of the New World Order. The banking cartel and the bloodline families at the center of the banking cartel have genuinely lost their fight for world domination. The Coalition for the Rule of Law is not directed from the center, but from the grassroots efforts to fight corruption that remain decentralized. You all are free to learn from each other. I can promise you that any and all efforts for the World Bank bureaucracy to try and regroup will be beaten back and disbanded. The plans for the global debt facility are already decided to replace national currencies issued by the banking cartel with temporary currencies that are going to be exchanged for the world's monetary gold reserves. The monetary agreements need to be signed and the mints agreed. These are administrative arrangements. The means to monitor and make sure that no gold goes missing, they have to be put into place for each separate country and decided by the people in each separate country. We will double-check with the people in each country somehow to make sure that they're happy with the arrangements. The hard work for each country to replace its government has to begin somehow. It's going to be smarter for us to leave things to percolate at the grassroots until people can make sure that the banking cartel has no role whatsoever. We're obviously going to remain in touch somehow to figure out how this is going to be accomplished. The most important principle is that we're going to retrofit to fix things. Who's we? That's going to be retrofitted too. The decision as to how this is going to be implemented is also going to be postponed and then retrofitted, so there's genuine grassroots input. Remember, this has never been done before in any place, and we're going to have to learn from our mistakes somehow. What's going to happen during the rest of this segment? I'm simply going to speak extemporaneously and let you all read about the things that were in a letter from a company in Taiwan that thought I was going to sign over the assets in the global debt facility to them 5 years ago. I'm also reminding you about the cure for cancer that the banking cartel hid from us. And I'm reminding you about Wolfgang Struck and Bengt Carlson, who thought they were going to trick us into signing away humanity's wealth. For good measure, there's the teleprompter on a segment about what happened in China under the domination from the banking cartel. And the definition of he who laughs laughs longest and best. So what I'm saying actually is that I've been learning on the job, and you've seen that. And in one of the documents that I put up in my social media, I'm showing you how you can go back and find every single thing that I've tweeted, unless the links have been broken, and then I go back and reset them when I find this out. I wanted to tell you about how I work because some people might be curious about it. And that is, I don't usually try, and I've been telling Dolores Harris here, who's been working on the floor director, I'm very comfortable leaving things for the last minute and letting things happen and finding out what that means later if I don't know. I'm very happy to wait to see what things mean. And so for example, I don't usually know what I'm going to say for these segments until I say it, which is what you're seeing right now. Is this a problem? Well, actually, no, it's not. It's not a problem because I'm very open to input that I'm getting from other people. And we had a confrontation, a very heavy confrontation this past week on YouTube. I uploaded the segment that I had pre-taped last week, and you didn't see it on DCTV because it was not live streamed. But I put it up there, and one of the people who was commenting is a fellow called Ahua Zeus, and he has a lot of information that's very interesting about the black nobility. I've told you about who the black nobility is. These are descendants from ancient Egypt who are our royalty, and they think that they're entitled to be in control over the world's wealth, but actually they're not. the world's wealth is in a trust, and we, all of the people of the world, are in control of the world's wealth, and we're going to use that wealth to replace the paper currency. That's what's going to happen, and the likelihood that it happens is over 90%. We know this because of the Department of Defense power transition model, which is very accurate. And the people in the U.S. military know that it's very accurate, and they also know that we're working together in coalitions with the rest of the world. So although there are people who think they're in control of the U.S. military, they're usually Knights of Malta, they're usually on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These people are traitors. They're not working for the United States, and the CIA in the United States is not protecting the security interest of the United States. They're working for the bankers. So we are going to have to change this, obviously. And the way we're going to do it, we're not going to do it suddenly, and we're not going to punish people either. The reason that we're not going to punish people is because if you look to see how many people understand what I'm telling you, believe that this is the case, they're in the minority, but we know that they're also working together with coalitions in the rest of the world, and we know that this coalition is actually much stronger than the banking cartel. And so we also know that the U.S. military, especially after what happened in 2013, when the people in the banking cartel tried to nuke Charleston, and the military knows this very well. They weren't happy about this. Most of the people in the U.S. military remain loyal to their oaths of office to protect the U.S. Constitution, which the banking cartel has suspended illegally, but that's what they did. And so we're all going to be regrouping. It's not going to happen suddenly. It's going to happen, but it will ultimately happen, and that's what we're starting to talk about now. We're talking about the plans for how we're going to do that, and we're going to have to remain in contact with each other by word of mouth. But I was telling you about Ahuwa Zeus. Ahuwa Zeus made some comments on my video that I uploaded, and then he realized that he had made a mistake with those comments. What were the comments? He was saying that he knew more about who the black nobility was than I did, and that meant that I was actually working for the other side. And my answer to Ahuwa Zeus was that I really didn't know who Ahuwa Zeus was, and I really didn't know if what he was saying was correct. But I did know that we were going to take our time and find out what was what, and we were all going to work together to find this out. Now, that really that undermined Ahuwa Zeus, because he had nothing more to say about that. Obviously, I was interested in who the black nobility is, but I said it doesn't matter whether I know this now, because we are all going to work together and we're going to find this out. And what I said I'm trying to remember. Yes, it was in this video. I said that the black nobility have to realize that humanity is going to find out exactly who they are, and we're going to pay attention to what it is that they're doing to make amends for all of the terrible things that they've been doing, because the tables have turned. We are all working together. That's the truth of the matter, and I'm going to be part of the pack, and if for some reason I'm not able to continue, people are going to regroup and figure out how to continue to work together. And that's what's going to happen until we regain all of our wealth and we get rid of all the corruption in our money system. There is no reason why we should allow the banking cartel to continue to start wars and to turn us against one another. We don't like that anymore, and we're not going to continue to do that. Well, anyway, YouTube took down my comments, but I had emailed those comments, and I took screenshots of the emails, and I posted them again. So in the meantime, Auschwitz is now exposed as being part of the banking cartel. And as you can see from what happened when Tiburcio Villamor Marcos tried to steal the monetary gold reserves of the world. I didn't have time really in the previous segment to tell you what his father, Ferdinand Marcos, had done. He set up the system so that after 50 years of hiding the gold, anybody who says that they are the ones who actually own the gold, their paperwork doesn't get considered because it's more than 50 years old. That's a very smart way to set it up. What this means is that humanity owns the world's assets, and nobody can claim them because they haven't gotten control over them before now. And so we, humanity, are going to figure out how to clean up the corruption in the world's money using our own money, which is going to be issued by villages and towns, and also from the monetary gold reserves in all the nations. And it's not going to be so difficult for us to figure out how to exchange the currencies. What is going to be important is to set up the systems so that nobody can gain control and steal them. And it's something which is not all that difficult to do. One of the things that is going to be difficult is that all of our professions have been co-opted by the banking cartel. The entire legal profession, the entire journalists. There may be a few honest journalists, but when they're trying to work together with the rest of their profession, they have a very hard time because the corruption is so deep. We've taken a long time to diagnose the corruption, and you can see how deep that corruption is. Every single government is part of this corruption, and we're going to have to clean up from the grassroots up. Now I see that we're scrolling, so that must mean we're supposed to do the outro.
Not yet.
No?
Not yet.
Good. We have more time. Well, I'm very glad that we're in contact. We're going to have to figure out how to set up our communication systems, because it's pretty clear that when you see the links that get blocked from all of the information that I try to give you, and I no sooner reset the link that it gets blocked again. And that, of course, shows you what the banking cartel thinks is useful to censor. But it's very time-consuming, actually, to have to continue to reset the links. I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. We've been talking about the Treaty of Versailles bonds issued by the Federal Reserve Bank that are going to be offset against all country debt. All countries' currencies will be exchanged for the monetary gold reserves of the nations on deposit in the Global Debt Facility. The bilateral Mansfield Breakthrough Successor Agreement and the Power Transition Model from the United States War College will put an end to the world wars that are begun by the network of global corporate control. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.